wanted to give you a chance to give an introduction to people who might not know you.
Sure. My name is Damian. I'm originally Argentinian, living in Germany since over 10 years. And I run Hatch Conference, which is the conference for senior product designers, UXR people, and anyone interested in general design and tech intersection.
And how long have you been doing that?
The conference is now 4 years old. This year's going to be the fourth.
Nice. David, I know your conference inside out. This is actually the reason why I wanted to bring you on the show. And I want to get your 2 cents on this. And look, I'll paint the picture for you, and that's the whole point of this podcast, to really discuss this in detail. A lot of people at the moment who go to conferences have really struggled to see the value that they get out of it. Now, I'll paint the picture. It does cost a lot of money especially if the conference is in another country which is not theirs. So they have to fly there, they have to book hotels. Obviously, and it spreads over a couple of days as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to get your take on it. Like, how can people see value from the money that's spent generally in conferences in general,
Mm-hmm.
and also from Hatch Conference?
I honestly think if people don't see value in it, it's not their fault, it's our fault. So there's nothing they have to do. It's something us as organizer have to do. I believe the problem is probably that the word conference like englobes so much, and there's so many type of events that would fit in it, right? There are like branded conferences for certain companies that do like a marketing actually conference and to promote their products. There are people like me who run independent conferences that are trying to get as much value out as possible, because that's what you want people to then look at the price and be like, that's not expensive, that's actually worth it. And there's obviously some other types of conferences that are a little harder to justify from your professional budget, but may still be like very inspirational. So this is like I think that's the main problem about it. So a lot of times, I've been to some of those massive conferences, and I've heard people kind of complaining about, oh, was this worth it, and traveling and all that. And I understand what they do, and I don't know if there's really a way to solve that from either side. It's kind of the proposal of it. So I would always say, you can't really look at the price of something from the actual number on the ticket price. It's more about like, what's that going to come as an investment that you make. And we were lucky that this year, thanks to all the sponsorships, we were able to keep the prices as last year. But even last year, some people were kind of approaching us about that. And obviously it costs a lot of money to put this together. But I think in general, when people look at what they got out of it, we didn't really get any complaints of like, oh, this was too expensive, right?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Damien, it's a hard one because let's split this up into kind of 2 questions. The first being, right now at the moment, how the industry is. A lot of cuts are happening, especially budget cuts in design teams. So they're reluctant to kind of spend on conferences or training. But there are companies who still do that. But there are a lot of people who do go to the conference who don't have the backing from companies. And so this is where it really does fall down to, what do you see as value to the people that come to the conference, from your opinion?
Yeah. Well, I believe there's no point anymore to go to a conference just to like continue your education, quote unquote, because all the knowledge is out there, right, on the internet. And even for Hatch, like our conference online ticket is like €50, which is very, very low in comparison to a lot of online conferences. And if the content is what you're for, you're going to get high quality stream, and then the next week you get everything else. But I think the reason to go to a conference has to go beyond that, and kind of the way to get the buy-in as well from your company has to go not from saying like, look at how wonderful speakers there are, look at how this content that I will learn to do. It's more going to be like, hey, I'm in my bubble of how this company works, and I feel like going to talk to other people who are solving problems differently is going to bring a lot of new insights and a lot of new ideas. So it's really not about too much the speakers or about the actual stage of the conference. Obviously, you try to make all of that inspirational and useful as much as you can. But I believe the true value of being physically somewhere is exactly that. budgets are being cut. We see it all also across. We're lucky that so far the revenue of since we launched the tickets hasn't changed too much from last year, but we're also a smaller event with 500 people compared to like conferences of like 4,000 people. But I believe then what happens is that people will have to choose more. And how will they choose? They will try to choose what's more valuable for them. So obviously there might be companies where they'll be cutting everything away. But otherwise, that might not be the case. And in the case when something like that happens, what I always recommend is like, okay, maybe the whole team doesn't have to go, right? Maybe some people can do, or maybe you can spread across. What happens a lot, for example, with us is like people would book, what we have 3 days, and people would book maybe like one workshop and the conference day, and the other workshop days and the conference day, and then some people come only to the conference day. So they kind of like split around a little bit, and then they can obviously take all of those learnings and make it a better return on investment, if you want.
Damian, do you think, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, and that's what I love about people that come on the podcast. Do you think the position of conferences should be around the value of the networking rather than the value of the speakers? Because I always hear, when people go to a conference, the best bit is the networking aspect of it.
Yeah.
You go, no?
But you know where that relies? It's the thing is, I think the as an organizer, the value of your conference has to be that you're very clear about who it is for and who it is not for. Because once you have that messaging clear, that's going to attract the right people. And therefore, the people who are surrounded by their peers are going to feel that it's a better event. So what happens a lot of times is that, especially in design or in development, you have like this big bubble of like, it's a design conference or it's a developer conference, and then everything goes. And then you're kind of like, okay, so this guy who's just like finishing university and this guy who's been doing like DevOps for like 30 years are in the same room, and not to discriminate it, to be like, oh, one is more, junior and one is more experienced, but it's kind of like you don't have a lot to exchange at that point of your career. So I believe those best events are the ones where you're like, hey, it's from here to here. Everyone else should not be here, but not to, to remove them and to discriminate them, but more to like create that safe space for those who actually matter for that curation of the event. And then obviously the possibility is that the content can live and go outside and be further after the conference, but the actual being in person in the event has to be very specific.
It then comes down to the question, like, because I know about Hatch Conference. I think I've been following since you lot started, and I think I want to get your take on it. Do you think that as a conference grows, and I'm going to use examples like Config and ADP list, and I'm going to dive into the ADP list one in a second. But do you think as conferences grow, it loses that personal touch? As you mentioned, you run workshops, you run training events. It's also a networking event. And imagine you throw like 2,000 people. It's like the whole Wu-Tang Clan is there. It's like you don't have the chance to really get that personal element out of it. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, especially the conferences that you mentioned are conferences that are backed by corporations and brands that basically, like for them, it's not like what success for them looks like hype and, mass appeal and like the internet breaking and that kind of stuff. So as a participant, you don't really matter too much in that happening, right? It's more about like, what's happening there, how does the internet reacting, and it's a different thing. For smaller independent conferences, obviously going to be how people perceive that value, because it's what's going to go as word of mouth, and it's what's going to make that the next year more people are booking or less people are booking. Like you can't BS with that. If it's gonna be good, then people are gonna hear about it, and the next year it's gonna be easier. If it was bad, the reputation kind of falls onto it. But obviously, there is something about the size of an event that matters in terms of like how your possibilities to like connect with others are going to be. And that's exactly one of the reasons why we chose not to grow Hatch further than this. Well, we could do it and obviously would be a lot more profitable. What happens to us is like we put a lot of efforts in this like roundtables and like smaller workshops and things that are happening in like groups of maximum of 15, 18 people.
Yeah.
And this is where the conversations can really flow. And you're like in a room talking about design systems with other 14 people that are also into design systems. And you're not, just in a general mass of just hearing about it. It's not a passive thing. And we encourage people to like walk around, rotate, and actually that's kind of how you learn. We have also one thing that at the beginning it was tough to conceive, but was to actually give a lot of time of gap in between the talks. So there's about like, if you like before the Q&A, you have like 40 minutes until the next talk that starts. So you have then 10 minutes Q&A and like about 20 more minutes or so to just switch stages or walk around or get a coffee. And this is something that people actually appreciate a lot because you're like, you can sit down and watch like 3 talks in a row and then your brain starts already to like burn.
Yeah.
So all this like idle time and possibility to like shift and change and relax in the ground and on the grass without having to worry about like, oh no, the next thing is starting in like 2 minutes. This creates an atmosphere that is different. You would have a very, very hard time doing this at over 500 participants. You would need like a multiplicity of rooms and like a coordination that is much harder to achieve. So that's why in our case, we prefer to just keep it there. For those conferences that are 10,000, 5,000 people, you can't really manage. And that's why for those conferences like Config, a lot of those like first day side events are what people enjoy the most, because really that's the only chance you get to be with like 80 people, 60 people around you, get to know everyone in the room and have a much more kind of curated thing. So it's smart to have it at the beginning because there's where you meet the people that are going to be with you in the masses, and then you have a better experience.
I'm going to take a stab at a different avenue with conferences, and you could be very honest. Do you think the conference market is going to change over these next couple of years due to, and I'll use a repetitive thing that happens with people on the podcast. So when people come on the podcast, I kind of leave a tiny bit about speaking about AI. And do you think the conference game is going to change because of this technical landscape?
Yeah, 100%. I'm not sure like how, because this is something that it's you watch every year. What happened to us was like 3 years ago when the whole AI thing started being more massive, and a lot of events were like rushing to get some content there, which was still empty because you didn't know what was going to happen. We chose to like kind of back down and wait a little bit to see when we can actually do something useful with it. And with the conference part, it is the same. The thing is, what I believe and what we try to do is like, while we have a bit that is about like trends and new things, we like to focus on the things that aren't changing, right? And this is where you can really get a lot of value, where as long as design is still made by people, there's a bunch of, ideas and concepts and ways of working that are always going to need that dialogue and that change. And then whether the interfaces are then generated by machines, it's not really that important at the moment. And that's why Hatch is a design conference with very little design talks, right? We have very few talks that are like, here's how you do this in Figma, or here's how you organize your design system. And we go more into like higher level, but a lot more relevant questions about the actual state of the discipline.
You think people that come to conferences, and I'll ask you directly, like, speakers, they always bring a certain crowd to them. Does Hatch have a tendency to bring repetitive speakers to bring back those kind of followers, or do you have to every year look into new new speakers that are going to be speaking on relevant topics?
That's something that's interesting. So when I started and I didn't really know how to run a conference, I also believed that, you have to have some of the names that are around the conferences, and we've had them, right? Like the first couple of years, that kind of like have a following. And then, if you have this person and this person is like, it's going to create a certain idea, like the conference is actually serious, and then people are going to book tickets and stuff. But we what happened was like after year 2, where we had many of those, the feedback was, hey, you don't really have to bring these people. What we actually want to hear is about like people who are actually making stuff, interesting stuff, working in companies that are like driving the profession forward. We
Hmm.
don't care if they're like the best conference speakers and the people that you see all over. We care more about like getting access to that content and those people first. So we completely changed our approach, and I think that's why last year was so interesting. And this year is even more. Like if you look at the lineup this year, is all people who are, we don't know if they're going to be great speakers, but they are great people in design, and it's important that they get that stuff across. So that's where it gets easier, because we don't think about it like, oh, let's look at how many followers this person has.
Oh, okay.
We have people who don't sometimes are not even on social media entirely, right?
Yeah.
And so we do is just be in like, which are the companies when at least for the ones that we invite, right? Because then we have a call for proposals that works differently. But we look at like, which are the companies that right now are doing interesting things, that are speaking about this, that have design teams that are different and that we would like to hear about. And this year is heavily on AI stuff, but it's not unique to that. And also it's not people that are just going to come speak about AI. And then obviously with the call for proposals, we sort of fill the gaps on the other things. And I think that creates really nice balance, and creates the big problem of just being like, how do you choose eight? You have 8 slots to fill
Mhm.
for the call for proposals. You have such great things. How do you actually choose and discard? And it's tough,
It's a tough one. I mean,
very tough.
yeah, because again, it comes down to the whole aspect of bringing value and bringing speakers that are going to bring value. Um, and I guess you're right. You don't know if they're going to be great speakers. It's kind of like a shot to see if they do perform. And that ties into another question. When you kind of run, I'll give you my 2 cents. I was just speaking at a conference 2 weeks ago. So I was moderating a panel. And so one of the key things I noticed, and I've done moderation of panels, I do a podcast myself, but one of the key things I noticed about moderating a panel in front of a live audience is the fact of the large group syndrome. Now,
Mhm.
I don't know if you know what the large group syndrome, if you want a panel to be interactive, you want the audience to ask questions, people tend not to do so because they're in a large group. They don't want to seem stupid, or they're shy or something like that. How does Hatch deal with the fact of giving the ability for audience to be involved in kind of like interactive sessions?
So we have a very simple system with kind of like people can ask the questions on their phone, like
Oh,
to our
yeah.
system in advance, so they can write them while their people are speaking, or they can leave them for after. And then we have a voting system. And at the beginning, we were a little skeptical of being like, will this work really well? Because do people actually want to be doing this? But it did. And it also allowed us to integrate everyone who's watching online very seamlessly into that. And it works super well. Also, it allows you to like get a bulk of questions, so that then our producers can moderate which ones are getting asked. And we really haven't had like last year a problem of like, oh, there aren't any questions. Obviously, sometimes there would be like more than we can manage, but that's it. Yeah.
It's the reason why I asked that is because a lot of people come to this conference and they want to ask stuff, and again, they use stuff like Slido and
Yeah.
to get these kind of questions up. But that's one of the feedbacks I've had from people where they've been to these kind of talks and it's just been somebody speaking and not for the chance for anyone to ask questions. And again, it
Yeah, that's
comes
pretty
down to
terrible.
that. Yeah, it really does come down to they didn't give a good platform for the large group syndrome because there's too many people. There wasn't something like Slido. I mean, what would you say to people who go to these conferences that do want to be that do want to be involved in these kind of talks and to ask these questions? What would you say
Yeah.
to people if they start searching for conferences like this?
I think you obviously have to look into this type of stuff. Like, if that's something that you're interested in, you need to make sure that that possibility is granted there. At the same time, we are at least are very aware that there are very introverted people who cannot do the kind of like, raise your hand and just like ask a question and stuff like that. So this helps a little bit, but also with the volume that we have, with the number of participants, it is something that the speaker will always kind of like stay aside when the next speaker comes in, and you're going to have the chance to talk to them. They most likely stay through the rest of of the day. So I think that's kind of the nice part about it, right? If you really have this like stage and thing, and then the person goes up, it's like kind of like a concert, and then they leave, and then you don't get to see them. It's kind of an outdated method. And in general, we like to feature people that don't have such big egos that they would be like, do not ask me anything, whatever. Obviously, sometimes it happens that there are some taboo topics, or there are companies that are very like PR strict, so they can't speak about the next release. They can't speak about certain topics, and we have to respect that and not allow that on stage at least. But once the mics are off and the person is on the side, and so if someone wants to go and say like, "Hey, I think your product was terrible" or something, they can do
Yeah.
it.
But I think that's, again, it ties into that first comment that I made. I think a lot of value in these conferences does come from that networking aspect and the ability to, to spend time with that speaker or to ask them questions when they're off stage really does bring a lot of value into it.
Enjoying the content? Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on LinkedIn, TikTok, and Instagram for more updates. Your support helps us bring you even more great content. Now let's get back to our podcast.
I want to backtrack on what you mentioned about positioning your conference in a certain way of we're positioning around senior to kind of, high director level and juniors. I'm not going to say excluded. I don't want to use that word. I think it's more the case that you position yourself in a good place that does bring value to those type of people. Would you say that does cut down in some form of diversity in some aspects? Kind of, if conferences only focus on a certain criteria within the job market.
No, not at all. I believe in this concept. So there's this book called The Art of Gathering. It's very well known among like organizers and that has this concept of like exclude to include. And what it basically tries to say is like, by removing everyone who doesn't belong, you're actually creating a space that's safer for the people who are there, and where really the actual magic can happen. You can't really see it as like not allowing a junior to participate is excluding them, because while there are still ways that they could participate, when your whole content is it's like if you're like, hey, this, we're gonna do like an event that's fully for like architects, and then you're like, I'm a graphic designer, why can't I attend? That's just discrimination.
Yeah.
And then they're like, okay, just come in. And then you're gonna be there being like, but I don't understand anything, or like, why is it not explained to a person like me? So we're preparing the content for a very specific audience, so it doesn't really make sense for anyone else to be there. However, we do have a very low entry point for the online and the recordings, which is what goes for like 50 and 40 euros. So anyone who's interested, and then we publish them on YouTube through the year for free. So everyone who's interested in the content will get access to the content. We don't gatekeep that. But then if we've had a roundtable that is talking about like, high level leadership, and then someone who's like very junior joins that roundtable because they can as the ticket holder, then it's not going to be the same room, right? So it's like we have to take care that those spaces are specifically there. And then within that frame, like anyone can be there, like then we don't have any other restrictions. And we kind of felt it's now turned into the core of everything. And I truly believe that if something is for everyone, is really for nobody. So you have to accept those type of things where like it's just for certain people, not as a VIP excluding thing, but more about like these people. There's so many junior events, like these people who are in this position where they've been doing this for 5-10 years. They need to get together and talk about this. Let's give them that space. And yeah, there will be others who do the opposite, right? Like who be like, this is for entry level. This is for like people who've just finished a boot camp or something, and then they have their events for that as well.
What was that sentence you just said? When it's for
if something is for everyone, it's really for no one.
I love that.
You can glue that in the back.
Yeah, we're gonna put that. We're gonna put that up there. That's exactly. A brilliant statement. I really like that one.
But it's true, and it's the same. Like a lot of people, even organizers. I know a lot of organizers have also like opened their design conferences into like product or general, stuff, because there is more appeal, or adding development or whatever. It's a decision that obviously you can make to make something a little broader. But then what happens is you go to those events and you're like, oh, this is not really for designers. This is for like everyone. So like, how do I find my path here? And how do I meet the right people? Gets to be a little more difficult. So I'm a big fan of the niche, and I believe in like communities and conferences, and everything should move more toward that. Obviously, some giant conferences cannot do that, but at least when you're starting something, smaller, clear about the messaging. And I think that contributes to the success of Hatch, because people are like, oh, this is for me, or this is not for me at all. And then, those who it is for, they really want to be there. So that makes it all much simpler.
Damon, I want to dive into some personal details. I mean,
Sure.
4 years now. So you started it during COVID season. That was
Exactly after. So we started planning early 2022, when it was still forbidden for more than 150 people to get together under, under roof. So that's also why our limitation of the first one was 150.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's such a, I mean, that is at the hype, at the hype of COVID. As you just mentioned, 150 people can't be in a room together, and you decide to start a conference.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I mean,
it was very risky,
yeah.
but it was also kind of the right place at the right time, because people were so eager to meet again. And obviously by the time, this was like January, right? By the time we got to September, like we were all vaccinated, everything was fine, and there was no risk. And also, like, we obviously offered like free refunds for everyone who got COVID in the last week before coming. We would just return the tickets, etc. But it was kind of being in the right place in the right time, and taking that risk allowed us to start with a strong hold, even if we couldn't fly in many speakers because there were travel restrictions and there were other stuff. It was already safe and possible to do it, so it was a great bet.
It's a bet. The bet has paid off. So
yeah.
In your 4 years, what have you learned like about doing conferences? Because I can
so much.
imagine. I mean, did you have that kind of knowledge and experience from before, or?
Yeah, so I have another company and we have a community for Shopify merchants, which is completely unrelated. But we did run a conference in 2019, and we were going to do another in 2020, and we had a lot of budget and stuff, and obviously it didn't happen. So a lot of the production part and like kind of what people are expecting, I started learning there. Also, we run the meetups. So I run this meetup called Berlin Product Designer Meetups together with my team already for 3 years, and or more. Well, it's going to be like 3.5. And this is also like smaller events and everything, but you get to talk to your audience, right? Like a lot of people who are coming to the meetups then go to Hatch, and there's a lot of like shared things. But I think one of the main learnings was to kind of like shake off all the preconceptions that you have as what a conference should be, things that we spoke about, like the speakers, or how, what are the things that are there, and try to just hear more about what people actually want. Then obviously there's a big part that is like the business, and like everything has to work financially, in advance for me to be able to put this up. So there are a lot of, all these big, great ideas and fun things that people suggest. Sometimes you're kind of like, yeah, but that costs $1 million, or like, that's not possible, that's not scalable. So you have to become a little bit this kind of like business mind first, because you know that if you're not achieving your financial goals, you're never going to be able to even put someone on the stage. So that kind of like tilts the balance at the beginning a lot. I've learned about like, sponsorship sales, marketing, kind of partnering, trying to, get speakers that sometimes are not so responsive, or sometimes are, kind of like it's harder to know, will they show up?
I know the feeling. I run a podcast. I go for the same thing. So
yeah, exactly.
It's a hard one. As mentioned, you reach out to people. Sometimes they just give you no answer. Sometimes they really rip into you, like how many views do you get? And when we started, it was like we were nothing. We were getting 0 views. And the ones, I have to admit, and there were some big names we had in season, those were the most humble people I've ever met in my life. Those really big speakers who say, hey, listen, I'll help you out. And I really found that those ones that were kind of like, I'm talking like in the 40s and 50,000 kind of followers on LinkedIn, were the most humble. And I'm probably going to gaslight. I did experience a lot of backlash from people who were like less followers and less known, but it was a weird thing. And it's, as you mentioned, trying to chase up speakers and stuff is a very, very hard job, because you rely on that as part of the business strategy, podcast business strategy, conference business strategy as well. So, do you want to delve into any secrets? Have you had any kind of bad experiences? We're not going to gaslight anyone, but
I've been very lucky, I gotta say. I have not have like any, well, I'm always worried about like, will I have this like big ego person coming here? Like, because I mean, our conference is very high quality, but we're not gonna, fly you business class and put you in the Hilton or something like that. Um,
yeah,
I mean, I guess if you ask for it and you're certain people, we have to consider it. But in
yeah,
general, it is still like an independent conference, and there are some traits to it. But so far, like the energy of everyone that has participated has been really good, and we haven't really had any giant problems on that. I mean, we've had like the first year was very DIY. We had a lot of like technical problems, like the stream failed. It was really nerve-wracking. We had like terrible rain, and we had like a whole outdoor stage. It was crazy. Now we laugh about that kind of stuff. Last year we had a Wi-Fi outage that likely because, everything's kind of professionally do. It didn't affect the conference, but people inside of the conference could not use the conference app. So luckily we have everything printed on paper, so they could
yeah.
kind of switch to that. There's always things that happen, but luckily, hopefully it keeps like this where everything's kind of a lot easier, at least with the people, which is the main core of the event.
Yeah. But it must be exciting, Damon. It must be like a
Yeah,
proper
you work.
energy
Imagine that you
rush.
work you work a whole year just to make like one podcast episode. This is kind of what
Yeah,
happens to me, right? We have another event that's like for design leaders that's happening now in April and May, in Lisbon, Barcelona, and here in Berlin. And that's like a lot more manageable. But except for that, the rest of the year and even doing that event, my core work is 3 days of the year.
wow. Wow, that's crazy. So the whole year is planned for just those 3 days. So
Yeah.
there must be a lot of intricate planning that goes into it. So
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And each year, you learn a lot. You learn on which things you have to let go on the spot, make decisions. But I think the best part is like through these years, I was able to like organically meet the people who are now part of my team, and now I can fully trust because we've done this a few times, and I can just now grab someone who does the stage and just be like, you go with it. I trust you. Someone who does the volunteering, and there's a problem, it's like how to solve it. You go, and I don't have to be at the center of everything. When producing, and that's a big relief because
yeah, delegation is a big thing. I
1,000,000%,
struggled.
1,000,000%.
Yeah, I struggle with the business here. Like, I guess with me and my business partners, we covered like certain things. I'm going to do some product placement now, Damien. So yeah, with Design Ops Aligned, my business partners focus on bringing the business. I am the one that focuses on spending money at the business because of the podcasts and advertising. So, and it's hard. It's really, really hard to delegate. But then I've learned over my years of being a manager that when you delegate to people, you actually really see some great stuff that you don't actually can do. And then I've noticed that the best you get out of people is to give them that full authority that I trust you with it. You're good, and you come to me when you need my help. So
Yeah, and each year, it's nicer to start like as early as possible because I think what happened was like, first and second year, I was very much in grip of everything and just have the people joining me last minute and try to like cope with it. And last year, and especially this year with the radio advisory board and people who are working on this from the conception of like who's going to speak all the way until like what's the schedule like and what are people doing there. It's so good because basically I don't have to, get all the things right myself. I can actually talk to these people, and also it really creates this kind of collective thing where I'm like, I can trust this because multiple of my team are actually like on board with this, so I don't have to be nerve-wracking.
Damien, you go against quite a lot of conferences. There's many out there. And conference season, kicks off around end of August all the way to October. So there's many conferences there. I mean, what would you say to the audience that are listen to this who haven't gone to the Hatch conference? What makes you different from all the others? And again, we're not gaslighting all the others. I really
No.
want the audience to know what differentiates you from all that's out there in the market.
Yeah. As we said, like basically we are, I believe first and foremost, we're a market-driven conference, and our content has to do with what we feel the market responds to. And we have, people like Tom Scott on the advisory board who are helping us with being like, what is he hiring for and what are companies like demanding? And then we have obviously people that are working internally in companies like Zalando or so, and they kind of tell us this is the problems that these are our type of companies are experiencing and things like that. So I think when I see other conferences programs, I believe that what we do different is like we are really focused on being like, which are the skills that we don't care about, like what's the future of design in 10 years. It's more like what is going to be relevant from 2025 to 2026 for you as a design professional with over 5 years of experience. This is what our kind of report is. It's kind of, one of those like design reports, but actually with people who are doing it on the trenches and can come and tell you about it. So if you look at our program also, we have very few of those speakers that you see over and over in conferences. Most of our speakers are, I wouldn't say first time speakers, but in general, just people who are like VPs of design or heads of design here and there, and they just like do this one time. So it's definitely going to be a different content, and you're not going to see like any repeats of other conferences or events. And then lastly, obviously that networking that you're going to have by having those people who are all seniors, leads, heads of design, VPs of design, whatever, all in the same room, it's going to be drastically different than when you go to a general design or a general product conference, where you're just going to have to look for those people and then kind of see if it's a match. Here, you just turn around and the guy behind you is a designer, the girl next to you is a designer, the woman in front of you is a designer. And that creates a whole kind of quite magical thing that you need to experience it.
Yeah, no, that sounds brilliant. Damian, you also mentioned something briefly when we were just speaking about, you also have other events going on this year in Lisbon.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to give the audience some details about that?
Absolutely. So on the second year of Hatch, we had one of the workshop days being about design leadership, and that resonated with a lot of people. And we realized there's a need in the market for design leadership training with facilitators that actually come from design leadership and are, doing that in their own companies, to bridge that gap, into like what happens when you go from IC to leader, and where do you get those skills and who do you ask the questions? And even if you've been doing design leadership for a few years, then kind of like just to surround yourself with others that might have the same problems. So it's like a super niche event. We have about like 50 people in Lisbon, 60 people in Barcelona, 80 people in Berlin, even doing masterclasses and workshops of about like 20, 15 people. So it's very, very, very small, but super impactful. And it's just all about workshops and classes. There is no keynotes. There is no conference in that sense. It's just really about like training. It's called Leadership Ateliers. And if you go to hatchconference.com, you're going to find it on the menu. But it's very close. Like the first one is in less than 4 weeks in Lisbon. And I think if you're specifically in that stage where you're like, I've just finished, I've just transitioned from senior IC to lead to manager, or I'm eyeing on it, it's like absolutely relevant. And we've done it last year in Berlin, and it was like so good that we decided to like multiply it in other cities as well.
And will the audience be able to see this online?
No, it's not recorded. It's all like on-site workshops, kind of like conversations that are open and we have people like Andy Budd coming, Andy Pulane, Julia Whitney. We have people from IKEA, Shopify, like HelloFresh, like a ton of like really great brands that bring their design leaders to teach you. So it's not like this consultant on leadership or whatever. It's actually like a designer that went through what you went through. It's a little higher and can come and share, some of those secrets, but nothing is recorded.
You also have Mel Cazzo there as well. I think I've seen her. Yeah, we've had Mel on our show. She's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And she's just one of the number of guests you've got coming on the show. So I'm looking forward to this. And yeah, please, let us know the details. We'll share it in the show notes. Please drop your comments down below if you want to message Damian about anything that's upcoming or just generally about conferences. We would love to hear your feedback and anything that we've spoken about today. And again, I brought Damian onto the show due to the fact that a lot of you have messaged me about the whole conference scene. I wanted to get him on the show and get his 2 cents because it gets a lot of bad stigma in regards to, how much money is being invested. And I think Damian's made a very, very good point in today's show about that. So please drop some comments down below. If you have any questions for him, we'll fire them off to him. We'll try and get him off his busy schedule and try and get him to answer it. But If anything has resonated with you, please let us know.
Yeah.
Damian, before we wrap up with the show, I want to give you some space. I mean, what is in plan? I know you've got 2026. You're working hard for 2026 for the Hatch conference, but just sorry, 2025. Sorry, 2025. But just generally, like, what is the plan for the Hatch conference from your perspective? Can you give us some details?
As I mentioned, we're not going to grow in terms of size. I don't want to bring Hatch to another city or anything because, its core is it's a Berlin conference. So I think what's going to happen, and we already see it, is like more people want to attend that eventually we have space for. Like it's always been sold out, but it's going to happen like faster and faster. And we just want to, kind of like make people that want to go there be able to be there as fast as they can. And then in terms of what we do continue to do that we started last year was to do mixers. So we partner with communities and companies in different parts of Europe that host like mixers on the first day of Hatch in whichever city they're in. We give them some money and we give them some some swag, etc. And then if you are in Lisbon and you cannot come to Hatch, you at least get to go to a meetup. And then obviously you get to watch if you want the online conference, etc. So we really try to expand through Europe, not in a kind of like growing more and being more giant conference, but more really to have the partnerships and the presence in all the major design hubs in Europe, just to have the message resonating and yeah.
So no plans to go to America, no plans to go to Asia.
No.
We're just keeping it all in. And I love Berlin as well, by the way. I do get love when I get the chance to go down there. So I'm glad that you're keeping it there.
I didn't mention it, but actually one of the focuses of Hatch, why it's different, is because we actually do focus on Europe, and our goal is like while we have American speakers, etc., we want to have the impact of the talks have to be relevant for teams that work in Europe, and that has a lot of nuances that that's why we don't want like a Google or a Netflix or a Microsoft if it's not really going to be the fit on that. So the companies that we bring and the talks that we have are all relevant to designers working in Europe with certain seniority. Instead of other, just more global conferences, if you will.
Before we wrap up, I want to ask you a question. Like a lot of the market, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong with this, a lot of the market is going over to the bricks side of the industry. That's just what I'm seeing. It's moved away from America. Europe is slowly moving away, but I see a lot of the industry in those Asia markets and the BRICS community as it's been known. What's your thoughts on that? Do you think things are going to change?
I don't know. I don't think so, because I think what's happening is like we're kind of seeing a little bit the end of globalization as we knew it. And then what happens, the same, right? Back to the niche. Like eventually, like Europe's going to need designers trained in Europe because they're not going to be able to understand, if they come from Asia and they have to like adapt to whatever it is, and the other way around as well. So what I believe is that it won't be as easy for someone to be like, I'll just, work in America, then in Bangkok, then in like Munich or something. Because the way we build product and the way we work in companies will get more specific. So I wouldn't see that as a potential like more world trend.
Okay. I wanted to get your take on that because I just had somebody on the podcast speaking about that in depth. So I was like, my last 2 cents. If you ever go to Berlin, you don't need to learn German. Everyone speaks English there. From my opinion, you can get by. But do learn a few words. Do learn Hochdeutsch. It does help in some sense. Show some respect as well. So please go down to the conference. And Damian, it's been amazing to have you on the show. I thank you for taking time to speak to us. I know you're really busy trying to get this conference all sorted out today, and we really appreciate you coming down and speaking about it. So it's meant a lot.
Yeah, it's been very fun. Thank you so much for having me.